This is Dennis Singh in Washington, D.C. Welcome to SIKH SARDAR on TV ASP Global. Our co-host is Udham Singh, our guest, Mansimran Singh Kalan. As always, our objective is to spread the message of Guru Nanak Ji, a message of an egalitarian society where all humans are treated as one, regardless to race, class, color, or creed. We're reaching out to both Punjab and non-Punjabi speaking communities. Our goal is to provide lively discussion of religious and historical importance. We will add political updates from time to time. Welcome Udham Singh Ji. Welcome Mansimran Singh Kalan.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you so much, Dennis Singh, for having me on.
My pleasure.
Dennis
My
Singh,
pleasure.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Mansimran Singh, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Our guest, Mansimran Singh, again, welcome Mansimran Singh Kalan.
Thank you, Dennis Ji. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Let us go and give a little background of your performance. It's very impressive. Mr. Mansimran Singh Kalan of the Sikh faith came to the United States at age 3. He now resides in Gainesville, Virginia. Mansimran Singh is a successful community organizer and business owner. He has strong progressive and democratic values with emphasis on education, equality, and economy. He stands dedicated to small business development, economic independence, and universal economic growth. He is a member of Prince William County Democratic Committee and served on Capitol Hill as a civil rights program officer. In 2017, Mr. Callan ran for Virginia's 13th District House of Delegates. Recently, Mansimran Singh was elected as Director of Soil and Water Board Conservation Board in Prince William County. He won by an astounding 50,000 votes. That's very impressive.
Thank you. It's all by Guru's grace.
Waheguru. Mansimran Singh family, of which I know quite well, is devoted to service and serving the Sikh community. They also serve outside the Sikh community. As I can recall, they provided needy assistance to those who needed it most when there was a flood. People were living homeless. They came to the rescue. A very remarkable feat. Mansimran, we want to lead in, as you are a political, strong in the political arena. We'll talk about Sikhs in American politics. Now, regardless of partisan politics, Sikhism is first and foremost in the mind of any Sikh. The Sikh remain totally devoted to the Sikh philosophy and Gurmat principles. These values may be the reason Sikh are best in politics, whether Canada, whether the UK, or whether here in the United States. For example,
Right.
18 Sikhs are elected to the Canadian Parliament. which is 5 more than that which is elected to the Indian parliament. We know that the British Sikh community recently launched a first of its kind political campaign targeting 50 seats nationwide. Here in the United States, Sikhs are rapidly coming into the political arena and are also being elected to prominent political positions. You are a prime example. Please give us your opinion on Sikhs in politics here in the United States and globally.
Yes, Dennis. First of all, I'd like to, say Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh to all the viewers um, of the show. Thank you for having me here. It's my great pleasure to be here. Um, my view on Sikhs joining mainstream politics in any country is always positive, as long as the basis of the Sikh who is doing this uh, is Gurmat and is the Khalsa philosophy, right? A lot of times we see Sikhs who join politics, whether it's in America, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or even back home in Punjab. Um, uh, a lot of times we see that people join politics for the purpose of doing greater good, but we end up doing a net negative because we don't follow the principles of Gurmat, like you said. Rather, we get entitled or enticed in the party that we choose to join politics in the first place. I think a good example of a good measure and balance is our brother Jagmeet Singh, and up in Canada, he is a member of the New Democratic Party there, NDP. Uh, we have to find the middle ground, the Venn diagram, uh, if you will, between Sikh principles and the principles of whatever party we join, right? Because you can't be in politics without a party. For a Sikh, the number one thing has to be the Gurmat philosophy. The number two thing has to be the Sikh Sangat that you're serving. And the number three thing has to be the party part of. It can't be the party being up top. Because when the party comes first, then you see people sacrifice the other two, right? And that becomes essentially the problem. So while I encourage Sikhs to join politics everywhere, because we as the Khalsa have to be the representative of the voiceless. We have to be, in Punjabi we call it Hada Nara. We have to be that, no matter where we are. And I think while we need to do that, we also need to be very careful which political party we join, which system we join, and how we join it, because it is indicative of who we are as a person, who we are as Sikhs, and which guru we follow, right? And by which, I don't mean one of the 10. I mean what school of thought in the world we follow.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll come back to you on this question. I'd like to ask our co-host, Udham Singh. Recently, Sikhs were praying in Akal Takht Sahib, and the praise within the prayer ardas, Khalistan was also raised. I understand there is such an Article 44 that was installed by Captain Arminder that blocked any such procedures. Can you tell us or can you express your opinion on this event?
Yes, Dennis Singh, you talking about they put the law 144 where nobody can pray at the Akal Takht Sahib for referendum 2020 and the for Khalistan. The Harminder Singh, the Captain Harminder, who is the chief minister, he wants to put a 144 that nobody can pray at the Akal Takht Sahib for 2020 referendum and for Khalistan. But there was a lot of police. I think it was a couple days or a week they've been preparing, but one gentleman went there and he did pray and he praised the Lord and he made a ardas, which is our prayer to the God, and at the Kal Takht Sahib, and they didn't know he was there, and that's what's going on right now.
So is this settled or it's still an ongoing issue?
Every time the referendum 2020 or Khalistan, who pro Khalistan people, they want to do something, and Harminder wants to stop that. He thinks that people don't want it, Khalistan, but when people do want it, and they go there and do what they need to be done, and he can't stop them. He has a police to stop them, but he don't have no control over all the people in Punjab.
Was Arminda, I get that name, Arminda, was his issue religious or was it political? What do you think?
He's a Punjab chief minister right now, and he wants to make his rule regulation according to whatever he wants, so he can govern the Punjab state the way he wants.
Are you there? Do we have are you there, Udamji? Can you hear me? Did we lose contact here?
I can hear you. I don't believe he can.
Okay, we'll just move on then. Man Simran, in the political arena, our Sikh youth all have ambitions, high goals, high ambitions. What do you recommend for them at this time regarding political career?
So, good question. I think first of all, we don't have enough youth that are interested. If there are any who are listening, please get involved wherever you are. Start from your county, your city, wherever you are. One thing I want to make sure that I tell anybody who is interested in the political arena, it's not a career. If you're looking to make money out of politics, if you're looking to make it a lifelong thing, then be very careful because politics is changing. There was a time when politics was a moneymaker grind. It's no longer that. The new era of politics, of progressive politics at least. I can't say much about the conservative side because the quid pro quo culture still exists on that side, or even in the moderate side that still exists. But over on the progressive side, where a politics of transparency exists, it is no longer a career. You can be shown the door at any given point of time if you make a mistake and if you're on the wrong side of ethical and moral things. So definitely, first judge yourself in the mirror as to what you support, what you don't support, and what kind of background you have in order to do that. But definitely get involved wherever you are, in your city councils, in your county boards, because that is where, Dennis, our parents' generation, who came from Punjab in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever you want to call it, they were busy putting food on the table and making sure that we get a good education and that we follow our Sikh principles in our lives. They were also busy taking care of households back in Punjab, so they could only do so much. It is our time to make sure that we are represented in the diaspora, no matter where we are. However, I think one thing we need to be sure of is the previous generation is very fond of saying Sikhs love America, or Sikhs love X, Y, and Z, whatever country you want to put into that bracket, and sort of always insinuate somehow that Sikh values equals X values. And by X values, I mean you can insert any country or any culture in there. What that does is it diminishes the independence and the sovereignty of Sikh values. And we need to be very careful of that. As Sikh Americans who grew up, who have grown up here in the US or in Canada, in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and I mentioned those countries because that's where majority of the Sikh population in the diaspora is. We have to be careful as to what the values of those countries are. If they were colonizers, if they were genociders, if they were perpetrators of genocide, and then we have to be careful in aligning Sikh values with X values. One thing I feel like a lot of people have a problem with is criticism. Criticizing the country that you live in, your host country, as a diaspora member, isn't a wrong thing. Yes, we are thankful for this place where our fathers and mothers came to, and they started a new life. Many of us were born here. Yes, we're thankful for that land and we're thankful for that system, but that system also perpetrated a lot of deaths, a lot of rapes, a lot of people were killed by that same system. So we have the right, I want to repeat this, we have the right to call out that system, call out the complacent people in that system when we get a chance and when it is called for. We do not have to remain quiet, lest we should not remain quiet when the system is doing a wrongdoing. So a lot of people think that because progressives criticize the government or criticize our country's history, that we don't appreciate its existence. We appreciate its existence. We just think it can do better. And we just think that it has been created to do better. It is a constant experiment, America. And when the experiment fails, you don't blame the scientists for trying a new chemical. You have to blame the previous one for failing. And so when, right now, we can see it is evident that America's current chemical reaction didn't do so well, especially with the 2016 elections. America's tolerance versus acceptance is showing. America's white privilege is showing. And it is our place as brown and black folks to raise that voice of justice, of righteousness, and of correcting the country that we live in. Because if we don't, my question is, who will?
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you for that. I want to come back to tolerance and acceptance. It's a very strong issue there.
Yep.
Tell me, our audience, you're a successful business owner. You really don't need politics, but I think in your mind, you see the need to change things for the better of all of us. At what age did you decide to make this adventure? Can you?
So number one, I believe so first things first, according to the worldly definition of success, I'm probably not a successful business owner because I don't take from the small guy and give to the larger guy.
Is
So
that what
I am
success?
not a uh, I'm a business owner because I don't wish to work for somebody. I wish to work for myself. But that is the only reason that I'm a business owner, and I want to create an environment where others can come and grow with me in my business. I just that's the kind of person that I am, and it's the kind of economic micro center that I want to create by my life. But in the worldly sense of success, I don't think I match that because in the worldly sense of success, from what I can see in the Sikh and non-Sikh community, you're not a businessman until you take from your employees and you unjustly, you until you practice some malpractices. And I'm not part of that. So maybe I'm not a business owner. Maybe I'm just not successful. But that's a different story for a different day. Nevertheless, my story, my journey into politics began when I was in 12th grade. I was actually set out to become a mechanical uh, engineer my whole life. I never thought of politics really. I thought of some civil service, but I always thought of being an engineer. So I joined robotics in high school with the hope of creating robots that would help humanity or just help daily chores. Uh, and when I was in Centerville High School in Fairfax County, there used to be an academy in Chantilly High School just across town. So I joined that. They had an Air Force academy, and I was intrigued. I wasn't in impressionable age, right? And I would like to say, in the slightest way, somewhat naive, because our youth are not taught about the reality of the military of our country. So, nevertheless, I wanted to join the Air Force. I joined the Junior ROTC, Reserves Officer Training Corps, in 12th grade. Uh, Joining that was a struggle because they had denied my admission into this governor's STEM program because of core Sikh principles. My dastar and my dadi, my turban and my beard, were the problem that the Air Force had, and they were not giving me my uniform to attend class. So I had to wear a coat, a suit jacket, a tie, and dress pants, um, a full suit, uh, in replacement of the uniform. And we only got to that point because a lawyer sent them a letter saying, "Hey, you're going to have some problems if you discriminate like this." Nevertheless, I went throughout the entire training program with my suit and not with the uniform. When it was time to join college, I asked the Air Force to accept me into the program as is. I was not accepted. Um, at that time, I worked with the United Sikh and the Sikh Coalition. My case was probably the only case that was worked on jointly, and it did not work out. I'm not here to say anything negative about uh, one of those organizations. They are doing a terrific job at what they're doing, civil rights and military uh, uh, advocacy. But at that time, it didn't work out for me. Uh, and in hindsight, Dennis, I am thankful because during college I learned about what our country's military does, and I learned more and I read more and more about what historically America has done to the world. And I'm glad that I'm not a part of that system. Uh, I will say one thing. One of the questions that brought me towards politics was going into the halls of US Congress and talking to members of Congress, talking to directors of various US departments, and asking them about Sikh acceptance and talking to them, and they didn't know who Sikhs were. Many of them didn't. Many of them did. And this was back in 2009, 10, and 11. The United Sikhs used to hold a Sikh summit on the Capitol Hill, and it was a great program. We got to go to Capitol Hill and do basically lobbying for our community. That's what got me into politics. When I saw 538 members of Congress and the Senate, 538 offices with 0 Sikhs in them, 538 chambers that had no voice of the Sikhs, I knew what I had to do next. So that summer, me and my father went to Rutgers University to choose my courses in mechanical engineering. This is back in 2011. And I went back to that college and I said, I want to do politics. And the dean looked at me and said, do I need to call your dad? But, in hindsight, I think I made the right decision because you must do what feeds the soul. If you don't do what feeds the soul, there's a problem you're going to have in the future. So, and I want to repeat that in Punjabi, that ਜੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ 'ਚ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਜੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਤਮਾ ਦੀ ਖੁਰਾਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੋ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਵਿਅਰਥ ਆ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਰਾਜਨੀਤੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਉਣਾ ਮੇਰੀ ਰੂਹ ਦੀ ਖੁਰਾਕ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਰਾਜਨੀਤੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਕੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ ਕਰਨਾ, ਲੋਕਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਚੰਗੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਰੂਹ ਦੀ ਖੁਰਾਕ ਹੈ। That's why I came into politics.
Thank you for sharing that. You were knocking on the doors of opportunity and equality at a very early age, earlier than most of us start. I'm sure if there are youth in our listening audience, they will take heed and they really appreciate your struggle.
I hope.
I'll ask the co-host. Go ahead, please.
No, I was just agreeing. Go ahead.
I'll ask our co-host, Udham Singh ji, do you have any questions for Mansimran Singh? Would you like
Yes.
step in here?
Yes, I have a
Please.
question for Mansimran Singh. I want to ask you a question, Mansimran Singh, that our youth, they doing good in schools and they're doing good in jobs. How can they get in politics and the things they wanted to do? What makes them little more having their way things? Like they want to get into politics or they want to serve the nation. And what advice you will give them?
So it depends on what stage in life you are and what your calling is, right? So if we, and this is me speaking to the parents of Sikh youth and Sikh youth themselves who are in high school and college. First of all, go to college for something that you have a passion in, right? And then look at your surroundings where you live, right? There's a number of opportunities that you can take advantage of. Number one is every state has elections in the state house, state senate, then the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. Those campaigns are happening right around you in your geographical region. Find out who represents you in Congress. Find out who represents you in your state legislatures and the U.S. Senate. And see if you agree or disagree with that person's politics and what they are doing for the past 5, 6, 10 years if they've been in office that long. If you agree with most of what they do, call up their office, find out their campaign, and maybe do a fellowship with them. Maybe do an internship with them. That's the first step into politics. My first step was when I interned for former Congressman Mike Honda in the Cannon Building in DC. And that was in 2013, 13 or 14, right around there. And that is how I got involved in politics. From there, I noticed that the national level was a huge thing to do, and I found out how Virginia works, and I then pursued at the county and the state level. So you have to find your issue that you want to work for. You have to find why you want to be in politics, and then you have to find the politician to work with. A lot of times the word politician has a negative connotation, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Being a politician is not a bad thing. The problem is that for an X number of decades and maybe even a century, politicians have been doing the wrong things. They've been taking advantage of their constituents and tax dollars and enriching themselves and enriching their friends. And that's the problem. That's why my generation of politics is here to remove that. And so when we call ourselves politicians, a lot of the previous generation either smirks at that, laughs at that, or just looks at it as a negative connotation. I want to make sure that that our community, Sikhs, and our young generation can look at politics as a positive career, as a positive move, just like they do when they think about being a doctor, engineer, or whatever they want to become. This needs to be an open and positive outlook, and our community is responsible for that. Our so-called when in our community, you can call them chache, tae, masiya, pua, or you can call them uncles and aunts, whatever you want to call them. We are all responsible for creating an atmosphere and environment for the community's kids. Unfortunately, right now, our environments are not positive. They're not secular, and they are not open. We have taboos. We have topics that nobody wants to discuss, and we have a lot of issues with our kids choosing their own path of career. Although I think that one's worked out a little bit, but the former are still issues that we have to talk about. Whether it's taboo and talking about mental illnesses, it's taboo about marijuana. There is a lot of concern in the community that people just don't have the correct information, and because of that, we discuss the wrong topics in the wrong ways. So I've tried time and again to create an environment around me where Sikh youth can approach me or folks that are near me to get those questions answered. And I think the ultimate answer to your question is as long as parents will keep an open mind and tell their kids that, hey, this is also something you can do. I think our youth can figure that out, and there's a lot of things to do around you, no matter where you are.
Thank you, Mansimran Singh Ji. Udham Singh Ji, do you have a follow-up question for Mansimran?
No, you can go ahead and ask a question, but that's the question I had for him.
Thank you.
Mansimran Singh, let's discuss Black Lives Matters for a moment here. 2 years ago, public opinion on the Black Lives Movement was at most negative. The movement grew increasingly popular from 2019 to this time. A Paul Research Center review found that majority of Americans across racial, ethnic groups now express strong support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Tell me, well, before, the awakening of people consciousness was by no means a local response. It became national overnight and still maintains its purpose regardless of the many efforts to extinguish the flames. Can you tell us why and what was responsible for the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement after 2019?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's not hidden from most of our viewers. A gentleman by the name of George Floyd was killed, murdered in broad daylight by the Minneapolis Police Department. Um, and that was the catalyst of the uprising of the BLM movement in 2020. Uh, I think one thing we have to make sure right off the bat is when we say Black Lives Matter, there is an inherent silent also behind it. We are trying to say Black Lives Matter also, okay? Because a lot of times people think by saying Black Lives Matter that we are saying others don't. That is not the case. And we have to be absolutely clear on that. There is a reason that we have to say Black Lives Matter, because for centuries they have not mattered to the system. For centuries they have been used, abused, exploited, and taken advantage of by a systemic racism culture that has been perpetuated by not only the federal government, state governments, but also police departments. So when we say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean that only Black Lives Matter. It means Black Lives Matter also. Um, Apart from George Floyd, there was a young lady named Breonna Taylor in Louisiana, if I'm not wrong, who was killed in her bedroom, sleeping, doing nothing. So a lot of times, people who are against Black Lives Matter will often say, or people who are against the notion that law enforcement, uh, disproportionately kills, attacks, and starts unnecessary interactions with people of color, they will often say that if you only comply, if you only don't do something wrong, maybe you won't be killed. Well, here's news. This young lady was murdered by the police in her bedroom while sleeping. Then there was a young lady who was murdered by the police in her living room while playing video games with her nephew. This is a real problem. We need to address this, and SIKH specifically can relate to this with our connection, our relationship to the police and the government in India historically, right? I don't want to draw parallels because there is no parallel to anybody's experience. I would not like somebody to draw a parallel to the Sikh experience of the genocide of the 90s, or of 1984. But I will point out some similarities, and this is how Sikhs can be empathetic towards people of color here in the U.S. We employ them; they are part of our fabric of this society, and we have a responsibility towards them, right? Uh, and that is that Sikh youth between the ages of 18 and 35 were disproportionately picked up by the police in the 80s and 90s, in Punjab and all across India. That is exactly what is happening to Black Americans right here in America. They're not being picked up without any reason, but reasons are being created where there aren't any. And when there are reasons, they don't get the same justice that you and I, or somebody who is fairer looking or who has less, melanin in their skin. The justice system is different if you're white, black, Asian in this country. And that can be proven and has been proven time and again by judges getting notices from private prisons saying, oh, we don't have enough inmates. You need to send some more. And not only that, but also mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums have created the culture where even petty crimes are being charged and convicted with 6 months to 6 years of prison time. So these are real problems. And can I say something very intricately to the Punjabi community in America? Many of us came here fleeing genocide. Our parents did. We found employment in the farms of California and the taxis of DC and New York and Chicago. And from those hardworking days, we went up to retail stores, gas stations, in trucking. I think it's time that the Sikh community realize that the bread and butter on our dining tables and the dal being cooked in our kitchens is because of customers of Black and Hispanic communities in the inner cities from New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, LA, San Francisco, Dallas, and St. Louis. We earn because people of Hispanic and Black backgrounds buy goods from our stores. That's how we earn a living. So if we can't stand up when the police is killing those same communities, then who are we? And how do we have the right to tie a dastar on our heads and bow in front of the Guru who gave his life for the self-determination of a whole different community that he disagreed with? So it is our responsibility as Sikhs to stand up for others. If we expect, and while this should not even be one of the things, but if we expect others to stand up for us, we ought to stand up for them.
Very strong point. Thank you so much for that response. Udham Singh ji, do you have any follow-up questions for Mansimran Singh?
Yes, I have a question for Mansimran Singh. And he was 2 when he came to America. And how does he feel all the time he's been in America, as his parents was immigrated to this country and they work hard to raise him, and he done good so far, and he will do good more, and makes his parents proud. How he feels about his parents' struggle and his own struggle, and our next generation struggle, that where he can make a difference.
I think that's a interwoven question. I'll try to answer it part by part. Yes, I came here when I was 3 years old. My dad has been driving a DC taxi for the past 30 some years. I come from an average middle class background. And I think that it is key that we appreciate our struggles. We appreciate what cards we've been dealt. We have to work with them, no matter where we are. One thing I want to make sure that I address is that as Sikhs, we are privileged. We are privileged because our parents look after us and look after our well-being for the future. You know, working day in and day out, 2-3 shifts at a time. Our parents, not just my parents, every parent out there, every member of the Punjabi and Sikh community and non-Punjabi Sikh community work extremely hard, because it is a core principle from Guru Nanak of working hard and making sure that we share our fruits from that hard work. So I think that only inspires me, helps me daily in my struggles, because a lot of times when you're at the lowest point, discussing financials or discussing anything that's happening in your life, or things around you in politics, for example, in society and in the community, when negative things are happening, our parents, Chardi Kala, is the only thing that becomes an anchor for our boat not to float away in the ocean that consists of Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Hankar, right? So the anchor that keeps me at bay, that keeps me in the harbor, is my parents' hard work and the values of my parents to stand up for the truth and speak up when something wrong is happening, not to be complacent. And that's one thing that unfortunately I've seen in my community and in communities around the whole country where I've visited. Complacency is one of humankind's, uh, biggest problems. The biggest problem that humankind has today is complacency. If we are quiet while something wrong is happening in our backyard, we are complacent and we are just as guilty. And that is one of the things that I hope that SIKH can start to address in the diaspora. When things are when local for example, Gurdwara committees, right? There's a net decrease of Sikh youth in Gurdwara, right? We have Sikh youth who are saying that youth should not go to the Gurdwara, right? And they're right here in the Northern Virginia DC community. And that is the problem. When you have complacency in a system, then people get the chance to take advantage, exploit, and abuse the Sangat, the Sangat's money, and the Sangat's emotions. So that's just one example. I'm not saying that is the only problem, but that is one of many, many problems that the Sikh community has. And I just want to say one thing. My parents, for one, taught me to never be complacent. And I can't be more thankful of them because I'm not one of those who will see something wrong happening and I won't remain quiet. I will speak up. And that is one thing that I've learned from my parents.
Thank you so much for the response. We have a few minutes to go, and before we close, there's just one more question I'd like to put to you, a topic: support for Sikh immigrants, showing empathy for Sikhs fleeing genocide and ethnic cleansing. And I recall the brutal act of terrorism against the Sikh community in Afghanistan on March 25th, 2020. More than 25 Sikhs died and more than 8 were severely injured. Previous to that, July 2018, another 18 or 19 Afghanistans were annihilated. The United Nations Security Council stood strong with the Sikh nation by condemning the attack on the Sikh community. As we are our brother's keeper, bearing in mind and others, we ask Guru Nanak, Charikala, Terabani, Sabat Bala. This is our prayer. We should be our brothers, sisters, keeper. We should be protecting these Sikhs who are less fortunate than ourselves. If we are now, and how are we coming to the aid of those who are less fortunate? Do you find this awareness amongst us? Is there empathy for those who are less fortunate within our global community? Tell us of your experience within the Sikh community about these issues of helping our brothers or Sikh immigrants who are in genocide.
Dennis, I believe that while Sikhs are a very hardworking community and we give back to every community we live in, Sikhs have helped with every single kind of natural tragedy that we can. Whether it's forest fires in California, hurricanes in North Carolina, Florida, and Houston, floods in Nepal, you name it, and Sikhs have been there as first responders of the world. That is a great thing. And I think that we drive that we have the same drive that Pai Kanhaiya ji had. We have the same seva bhavna that Guru Sahib instilled in us through Amrit and through Gurbani. But I also think we lack. I am going to do a little bit of constructive criticism for my own house right now, and by house I mean my pant. And that is that we have not developed and built our own institutions. Our own resource centers are lacking, both domestically and globally. We can and should do better. Sikhs do not have a political capital in the US or Canada. Even in Canada, where a Sikh ran for prime minister, we do not have the pull in politics to have guaranteed all of those survivors of the Kabul attack uh, political asylum in the US, Canada, or the UK. Everybody was pushing for them to go back to India. A good friend of mine, a fellow Khalsa brother, Manmeet Singh, here from Maryland, worked on that case, and he was very diligently. He worked on that case, and he made sure that those families got safe haven. But my concern is that it should have been easier. Countries that we have paid billions of dollars of taxes in, Canada, America, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, should have been upfront and said, hey, Sikhs are an asset to our countries, have always been, I would say law abiding, but in the sense that we have been a positive income to these countries. They should have taken that opportunity to take. I mean, these countries should have been fighting over one another as to who gets to give political asylum to Sikhs. But that wasn't happening. And that's because we don't have enough political capital. And it goes back to our co-host Sardar Udham Singh's question before. What can the Sikh youth do? The Sikh youth needs to develop political capital in this country. The Sikh families need to start taking out the swand, not only for Gurdwara, but also for political donations, so that we have the political capital, the political pull, and the swing when issues like this rise. And one of our problems is that we have not been able to put together our community's resources, monetary resources, as well as physical resources, like our Jewish brothers and sisters have been able to, like our Muslim brothers and sisters have been able to. And that is the problem. We need to do better. We can do better. We have the financial knowledge, we have the financial backing. We just aren't putting the money in the right place. And I just want to ask, we need to all look in the mirror and say, what would the Guru have done? And if we can just ask that question, I think we will be able to do better very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your response. We are winding down here, and I would like, before I turn it over to our co-host, Udham Singh, I'd like to thank you, our guests, Mansimran Singh Kalan. Thank you, our co-host, Udham Singh. And most of all, thank the TV ASP global audience for tuning in to us tonight. We really appreciate your company. And lastly, thanking our technical director, the person who made all of this possible. Much thanks. Over to you, Udham Singh ji.
Thank you, Dennis Singh, and thank you, Mansimran Singh, and thank you to all the guests, all the people going to watch in our program, and people who are going to watch the program later on. And thank you for ASP, the TV. I want to put a couple cents in with all the talk we've been talking. There's a big problem for Sikhs right now that from 1947 that we are treated as second citizen in the country in India, and when we come to the country where we live, we leave the India and we come to the other countries, and we have struggled in in the countries, two countries like Virginia, a country like America, Canada, and England, and all over the world. So we leave the struggle and we come here in the struggle, and I believe that freedom need to be treated everybody same. Everybody should be free, and everybody should be treated same. And that is a big problem for Sikhs right now, from 1947 till today, and it's still part of it. So soon we have our nation, our country where Sikh are the ruling for themselves, then it would be much easier. And I want to say thank you again to our technical people. Thank you to Aman Simar Singh, and thank you to Dennis Singh, and thank you everybody who've been watching. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so very much for having me.